Hello, everybody. Are you ready for the truth? Are you ready for the truth of what it is like to be an individual? Are you ready to be alone with yourself and to not be in some kind of a group? Because what I'm talking about embodied language. And embodied language is very different from disembodied language. Our usual way of talking, disembodied language, is a group behavior. Yeah. You don't realize this, that you are day in, day out involved in group behavior, in disembodied language, in which you do not listen to yourself, but in which listening to others and making others listen to you is more important than listening to yourself. You never listen to yourself. You never speak in order to be able to listen to yourself. That is something that only an individual can do who is not part of any group, who is enough unto himself, alone, like I am right now. So, whenever people talk about community, whenever people talk about us together, and even whenever people talk about being on the same page, yeah, agreeing with each other, we are, believe it or not, talking about group behavior. Nobody seems to realize this, but I do. And I have embodied language, while everyone has disembodied language. So are you ready for embodied language? Are you ready for a way of talking, a way of dealing with language in which you are in charge of your language because you are listening to yourself? You are in the driving seat. You are the one who decides how to speak and what to say. And your freedom of speech has nothing to do with the willingness to agree to disagree. You know, that's what people talk about when they talk about the freedom of speech. Yeah, that everybody is allowed to have their own opinion or their own whatever, their own say, and they have the right to say it. And of course, that's great that we have that in the United States. But the freedom of speech doesn't get us to embodied language. Hasn't gotten us to embodied language. As a matter of fact, we have been continuing with our disembodied language in spite of having the freedom of speech. And consequently, we have continued with group behavior. While we are believing that we are such free individuals. We've been talking about freedom, but we've never really experienced freedom because our language wasn't expressing our individual freedom. Yeah, there's freedom that we have as groups, of course. Yeah, we have the freedom of speech as a group, as Americans. But there's freedom of speech that we have as an individual. That is, that we can listen to ourselves instead of to others, yeah? That we can be the authority of our own lives, the directors of our own lives, the creators of our own lives. That we can be in charge of our own language. That language is not, as it is in disembodied language, some sort of involuntary phenomenon that presumably goes on inside of us as our mind that keeps on rambling, your mind that keeps on chattering, as they say, the monkey mind, as the people who meditate talk about the monkey mind. No, there is no such thing as inner language. Yeah. And your brain is just like a computer. I know that we have talked about this. I know many other people have talked about it, but there's no difference. A computer is programmed and your brain is also programmed. And you can only produce the behavior, the language, which you have been programmed to produce. And unless there's a different program, unless you do some deconditioning, which means unless you stop old behavior, good morning, unless you stop old behavior so that there can be some new behavior and reconditioning, and that's the acquiring embodied language, having embodied language instead of disembodied language, that is reconditioning. All right, that is stepping out of your history of conditioning. Yeah. So on this video, I want to continue to talk with you about the fact that the future of mankind is not to the group. Yeah. And of course, people just will brush it off and they will say, that is just ridiculous. But in Western free societies, individuals have rights. These rights have determined that previously existing group behavior has been weakened, has been undermined, if you will, has been disintegrated, cultural conditioning. Good morning. Cultural conditioning that was going on in the past is no longer going on in the same way as it used to go on. Yeah. People are not anymore as patriotic. People are not anymore as religious. People are not anymore as faithful in the institutions of the countries in which, politically and religiously and philosophically, economically, educationally, people are not having any more so much faith in the institutions that were scaffolding the societies, not only just America, but all across Western free civilizations. The scaffolding of these societies was determined by these institutions, and these institutions are no longer doing what they have been doing in the past. So this is why you get enormous divisiveness in various countries, enormously heated and contentious debates, which all is just more of the same disembodied language, of course. Disembodied language upon disembodied language. It just goes on and on and on. But the future of mankind in these free societies, because I'm talking only about the free world. I'm not talking about any country in which there's no individual freedom. These countries in which there's no individual freedom, in which there's never been any individual freedom, these countries, they cannot be used as a template for embodied language. They couldn't give individual rights to people. Yeah. It is countries like Holland, where I come from originally, but I live in the United States since 1999. It is Western free societies which have given rights to individuals. And these individuals have been, to a large extent, or to a certain extent, let me put it this way, not to a large extent, well, yeah, to a large extent, also to a large extent, they have developed in so many different ways. Individualism has, in so many different ways, flourished, even without embodied language. Yeah, that's really true. That free Western societies, yeah, they want to continue with their individual freedom. They do not want these freedoms to be eroded, taken away, demolished. So this is what the whole big deal about when you hear people talk about, oh, democracy is under attack. Well, let's just cut to the chase. Let's just talk about the fact that individual freedom is under attack. Yeah? Because that's really what is at stake here. Yeah? And democracy has given, or, democratic free societies has given rise to individual freedom. But that individual freedom has never been completely assumed with our language, because disembodied language, which is a group behavior, has contradicted our individual freedom up to this very day, and it will continue to do so unless we're going to address it, unless we're going to address our disembodied language with embodied language. Good morning. So, here goes an airplane. Good morning. So make no mistake, unless we are going to address our disembodied language, in which we do not listen to ourselves while we speak, unless we are going to address that with embodied language, like I do, I'm having embodied language, I listen to myself, we are not able to get out of our disembodied language. We are inadvertently, continuously engaging in disembodied language without realizing it. Yeah. So what I have is truly the language of the individual. This is the future of mankind. I am the future of mankind. Yeah, believe it or not, I don't care. I'm just saying it. Embodied language is the future of mankind. And therefore, the future of mankind is not group behavior, is not disembodied language, is not community, is not how we are all in this together. Yeah, we are not better together. Yeah, there's a big, in the town where I live in Chico, there's a big wall somewhere, or a fence that they put around some area where previously there was a store, but now it has been all fenced off with wood and boards. Anyway, somebody painted on that fence, "We are better together." No, we're not better together. We are individuals, and our togetherness is only as good as we can be true to ourselves. Yeah. And our togetherness, our so-called togetherness, in which we cannot be ourselves, in which we are still not able to have embodied language, it's just phony. It's just talking about freedom without having freedom. It's believing in freedom, dying for freedom, fighting for freedom, and yet not really living it. I'm living freedom. I'm living my individually lived experience, because my individually lived experience is fully expressed with my embodied language. With your disembodied language, you cannot express your individually lived experience. So community, once you have made for yourself the discovery that there is such a thing as embodied language instead of disembodied language, once you have discovered that you can stop your disembodied language, yeah, of course, you can stop it. Unless you stop it, nobody's going to stop it for you. So unless you talk with yourself and listen to yourself and realize like, wow, now I'm listening to myself and I wasn't listening to myself before. Wow, I have stopped my disembodied language. Yeah, you have stopped your disembodied language and you are now having embodied language. Once you make that distinction, there are so many things that are now different when you continue with your embodied language. And yeah, it may still be painful for you, or what is it, difficult for you or challenging to recognize, to acknowledge, to understand that we are all alone with our embodied language. And we remain alone with our embodied language till the day we die. And our so-called togetherness that we keep wanting to have, yeah, because people keep wanting to belong, they keep wanting to fit in, they keep wanting to conform, they keep wanting to be accepted, they keep wanting to... It all deals with our conditioning history, that we want something from others. And with embodied language, we have everything we want. We are our own authority. Our language is working for us, and we are voluntarily engaging in the correct use of language. Yeah. And so this whole issue of fitting in and belonging and being together and enjoying together, all of this disappears. And yeah, are you ready for that? Are you ready for real self-knowledge? Because that's also what it is. You cannot have any real self-knowledge if you keep being busy with being together. Yeah? So, in as much as it is, of course, a challenge, it is, of course, yeah, something that we haven't gotten to yet, and something that unless we get to it, it will never develop. Unless you as an individual get to your own embodied language, it will never emerge. And if it emerges, it will only emerge in such a way that you will be endlessly conflicted, because you keep going back to your disembodied language, which undermines, of course, your embodied language, which makes your embodied language impossible, and which contradicts your embodied language, let's put it this way. Yeah. And so it is, you could say, ineffective, simply stated, to have a little bit of embodied language and then to continue again with your old conditioning. Of course, you could say it is inevitable that we are again affected by our history of conditioning. And that's true. It is true that there is the effect of our history of conditioning, which we ourselves are only able to counteract. But unless we just keep doing that, unless we keep stopping our disembodied language, and unless we keep saying like, no, that is, that is more of the same disembodied language, in which I am not listening to myself, in which I am using my language incorrectly, in which I believe again in inner language, Yeah, because that is involved in disembodied language, the belief that you have an inner dialogue with yourself, that you have thoughts, that you have a mind. No, you cannot accept that. You don't need to accept that because you can say it. You can say what's on your mind to yourself. You don't need anybody for that. And that's why you are able to fully express it. You are able to express your illusion of inner language to yourself. And then as you hear it, you realize like, wow, it is gone. But it was never really there. No, it wasn't. It was only there because of your conditioning history. It was only there because everybody else keeps talking like that. Once you keep having embodied language, once you go on with your embodied language, there is no mind, there is no inner language. You're done with it. And yeah, your history of conditioning may sometimes still, it may still pull you back into this old belief that you have a mind, that you have inner language. But that's not going to faze you. Yeah? And the fact that even, look at me. I'm just an individual. And I've been saying this for the last 45 years. And I've studied psychology. I've studied behaviorism. Yeah. I've taught psychology. I've worked in quote unquote mental health. I've worked in the field of psychology, psychiatry for many, many years. Given therapy, given groups. Worked with every possible mental affliction, mental disorders as they call them. Where people are bipolar, depressed, schizophrenic, obsessive compulsive disorder, you name it, suicidal, addicted. And of course there's a whole combination, comorbidity of people being addicted and having mental health issues and being abused and having trauma and all that kind of stuff. I've been exposed to all of that for many, many years, and I know better than anybody else how our embodied language is the solution to dealing with all these problems, which inadvertently always are based on our belief in inner language. Yeah, I didn't get any foot on the ground in the field of psychology or in the behavioristic world or in the world of academia, even though I've given many seminars, very successful. People loved it. People say, oh yeah, we need more of this. Yeah. People say, oh, this is so important. Oh, I got some new tools in my toolbox. Yeah, no. That's not what this is. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a great theory. No, it's not a theory. And so, oh, we should do research on this. Well, good luck with that, if you want to do that. I'm not into that. And I'm glad that I stay true to my own perception of what this is, because it's a waste of time. I'm into the continuation of my own embodied language. That's what I'm into. And other than that, nothing I care about. This is how I live. And this is how I will continue to live, because the consequences of my involvement in embodied language are always good. Always. Now, yeah, I know you don't want to believe it, but it's a fact that I can tell you about, because I live that kind of life. And you could be living that kind of life too, but only if you begin to talk with yourself, listen to yourself, instruct yourself with your embodied language to do different things than the things you're doing right now, which are of course all based on your involvement in disembodied language. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm never affected by disembodied language, of course, but I keep reminding myself whenever it's needed, no, disembodied language ain't my cup of tea. Group behavior is not my cup of tea. Togetherness is not my cup of tea. And yes, I happen to be married, and it's a miracle that my wife allows me to be me, but she does, and she knows better than anybody else, I would assume, what this is, because she makes no problem about it, that I'm having my embodied language. She makes no problems about it that I live this life, that I'm able to live with her, and she herself connects with me because she connects with herself. And so it's amazing how the two of us, good morning, hi, how the two of us have, you could say, grown together or evolved together in our many years of marriage. Anyhow, I want to go back again to the issue I was previously addressing and which I want to further elaborate on. But first I need to sniff my nose a little bit and cross this street here. I always get a bit of a running nose when I ride my bicycle early in the morning. As you may have noticed. Okay. So, you know what? I'm gonna walk for a little while and talk while I walk. Yeah. I'm gonna take my phone in my hand here and my bicycle on the right hand. Okay. So, you know, I myself have gone, of course, on a big journey, so to speak, where I grew up in a family of 6 children, and being the black sheep of the family, doing a lot of things wrong as a kid, and being kind of stressed out and anxious, eager for attention. I had you could say, I mean, I don't consider myself having had an unhappy childhood, but I was the black sheep of the family. I didn't get much recognition from my father. There was a lot of punishment. There was a lot of disapproval. I could never do anything right. And I felt while growing up, and there's many other things that have happened, but I don't want to go into all of that. I just want to say something briefly about how I grew up, how my way of growing up basically set the stage for my early teenage years, in which I was on a sort of a journey to find myself, to be my true self and all that kind of stuff. And was busy with that for many years. You know, doing also therapy groups and meditations and being part of a religious cult. I was with the Bhagwan, with Osho. And I believed in it back then. And I was really enjoying it also, because it gave me opportunities that I didn't have before. Oh, and so So it is. Just let this person pass for a second because she. So as I grew up, I felt like I had to figure myself out, and so that led to this, yeah, so you could say spiritual journey, which in retrospect was all just about, you know, basically figuring out what I wanted and being who I am, and I have always been. But it was also about moving away from group behavior. And so in spite of the fact that I was part of this cult, I always felt like a misfit. And even in this cult, I felt like I didn't fit in. I never really lived for any period of time in the commune. And I never got into the inner circle, whatever. I was never a popular guy. Because I was my own person already, with all its problems, that is. But nevertheless, I always stayed alone with myself. And and even though that was very difficult for me, because I wanted like nobody else, yeah, I had already felt so rejected. I already felt so hurt and so humiliated, and so I felt so so sad that that I wasn't able to find my way. I tried many different things. Who am I? What am I going to do? What's my purpose in life? Why am I here? And no matter how I turned myself inside out and upside down, I just couldn't seem to really figure out what it was. And I traveled. I went to many different places, and I met many different people. And I did many different things. But what I'm telling you is that it was really difficult for me to basically acknowledge that I am alone. And I cried a lot. And I complained a lot, and I got upset a lot. And I freaked out a lot. Because I didn't feel accepted, I didn't feel respected, I didn't feel seen or heard. And I felt it was unfair. You know, as a child especially. As a child, I was often literally saying, like, it is unfair. It is unfair that other people get away with their lies and I never get away with anything. I was always caught with all my lies. How could that be? Well, I guess it was written all over my face. But okay. I grew up the way I did. And yeah, I had to learn how to be alone in spite of the fact that I didn't want to. And I tried so hard to fit in, and I tried so hard to do the right thing, and it all just never really worked out. Until at some point, and all of that had to do with so many different experiences, one of which was, of course, years of singing, where I tried to sing classical music, and sang opera and arias. And I was pretty good at it. I even ended up in a conservatorium for becoming a tenor singer. Yeah. Anyway. But singing, you listen to your sound of your voice. And you try to make a beautiful sound. So I was doing that for many years. In any case, then I, at some point, was done with that. And I had already done so many other things, as I'm saying. I had tried various things, but the thing was, I wasn't satisfied, and I had to carry on. Hi. Good morning. Hi. You too. As I was saying, the dissatisfaction was really driving me. The dissatisfaction with everything I did, dissatisfaction with the people I knew, dissatisfaction with myself. And And yet there was also satisfaction in having my way. There was satisfaction in being thrown out. There was satisfaction in spite of me being alone, in spite of me being not part of anything, really. And what is that satisfaction? Well, that satisfaction later I found out when I studied behaviorism, that is self-reinforcement, that is automatic reinforcement. Yeah, that is when you enjoy what you're doing. You're doing it here. Why am I riding my bicycle? Nobody tells me. I just enjoy riding my bicycle. It is self-reinforcing. And for some people, dancing is self-reinforcing, and for others, singing is, and for others, riding is, because, you know, there can be many things. Cooking or gardening, yeah, or even physics, learning about, you know, the laws of nature. Things can be self-reinforcing, and once you happen to be genetically made up in such a way that these particular activities are reinforcing to you, because obviously, there is that aspect to a person's behavior. I cannot ride my bicycle if my legs are not working, or if I cannot keep my bicycle in balance. So I'm physically capable of riding a bicycle. If I'm physically incapable of riding a bicycle, I couldn't do it. So, and singing too, of course. I have this affinity with sound, and so I like sound. I like to produce sound. I like to listen to sounds, and so I got into singing and other activities, gardening. I did actually a lot of physical labor when I was younger, and I like to just use my body, and so basically the accumulative effect of the things that I had done and the things that I stopped doing because I no longer wanted to do them, went on with the next thing. That accumulative effect led to a situation where I at some point began to listen to myself. Began to speak with myself and listen to myself. And it was a marvelous moment in time where I, for the first time at some point, heard myself speak with myself. And I realized in that moment, in that one moment, I realized that everything had changed. And I knew at that moment that everything was going to be different from that moment on. And it was true. I knew that I was going to follow through on what I had discovered. I knew that this was going to determine the rest of my life. I knew that I had found what I was looking for. And what I didn't know was that I didn't know anything about conditioning. Maybe a little bit, but not the way I do today. I didn't know anything about, the problems that I would be having continuing with that way of talking in which I was listening to myself. That was a serendipitous moment, because I found a gong, which I hit with a stick and a ball on it, and the gong made a nice sound, and I said, wow, that sounds good, that's how I want to talk, that's how I sound. And from that moment on, I began to produce that sound, and I began to also figure out that, good morning, I began to figure out that there were many things that stopped me from making that sound. And the only way to figure that out, what it was that was stopping me, was to be alone with myself so that I could figure it out. So if I wasn't already alone, I became even more alone. And the more I discovered about my embodied language, the more alone I became. The more I became myself. And of course, this is just a way of speaking, because in embodied language you are always yourself. But as you accumulate more history with embodied language, your history of conditioning determines your future behavior. So I have seen an enormous decline of my disembodied language and an increase of my embodied language. And it's just fantastic how that has unfolded. And I predict, sorry, hi. And I predict for everybody who does this, that this is going to unfold in more or less similar ways as it did in my case. Because we are simply talking about a very scientific process of deconditioning and reconditioning. Deconditioning, that means deconditioning is the stopping of the old behavior, and reconditioning is the learning of the new behavior. And there's just no way around it. And you got to do it. You are on your own. And even if you have accomplished your ability to stop your disembodied language and you can have embodied language. I hope you are going to do this in 2025, so that we can have then embodied language together, quote unquote together, in 2026. But I'm letting you know, and maybe I have said it incorrectly, but when I say we're going to have embodied language together, we are not going to have embodied language together. We are going to have embodied language alone. And yes, we will be speaking with each other. So I'm going to leave it here for now. I believe this is a good end.